Hello and welcome from us. Coming up a little later, we're looking at the latest thinking on what river crossings are needed in East London. Could the Mayor's plans prove a bridge too far for some of his Conservative colleagues? Here to talk about that and with us for the duration this week are Matthew Offord, Conservative MP for Hendon, and David Lammy, Labour MP for Tottenham. Welcome to you both. And let's start with the bigger picture of what investment London needs and how it should be able to raise the money to pay for it. Next week, a report done by a panel of academics and politicians will recommend devolution of more tax-raising and retaining powers to London government in the form of both the boroughs and the Mayor. Matthew Offord, would you welcome that? We've been talking about business rates, probably a revaluation of the council tax, more borrowing powers for councils. Would you welcome that?
I certainly would welcome it, but I would also say that it's not an entirely new idea either. When I was Deputy Leader of Barnet Council, this was something that we were lobbying the Treasury to do so for us. We needed new infrastructure, and when we had new building projects and regeneration, we were very keen to keep stamp duty and some of the other taxes that were levied to provide that infrastructure. So it comes as no surprise that the report has actually come to this conclusion.
Just a surprise then if it seems so logical that the Conservative-led government isn't embracing this immediately and saying yes.
Well, I'm not always sure if it's the government. I think it's usually the Treasury that has final decision over these ideas.
Last time I looked was part of the government, but yes, but, you know, well, why not? Is it time for the Treasury? Would you call for it? Would you say it's time for the stamp?
I would certainly support calls for it. I believe in greater localism, allowing people to make decisions at a local level rather than the Treasury deciding certain things. And the Mayor will have spending decisions in the future. For example, a projection of the population will increase. That means that he's going to have to put more infrastructure in, such as the tube, rail works and other sorted projects. And this could be one way of funding it.
David Lammy, it was Labour, of course, that created the limited architecture and limited financial devolution. And while there has been further devolution since then, powers of economic development and housing and so on, nothing. I mean, Labour wasn't thinking about doing anything in terms of tax revenue and tax-raising powers. Is it time to look at that?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think Boris is right to have asked Tony Travers to look at this. I know there was a leak. We haven't actually seen the full report, but he's definitely the man.
It's pretty well all the main points there, though.
The man to do the job. If you like, the GLA is now 13 years old. It's a teenager, and I think it's time to grow up. We cannot have a situation where, for example, we need to do Crossrail 1 and it takes 30 years to get part of the money out of the Treasury to make this happen. The Treasury will always think that London's roads are paved with gold. There are other considerations both across Whitehall and across the country. This isn't about more money for London. It is about having greater flexibility, I think, for the Mayor and local authorities to both borrow, to build housing, and to retain stamp duty, business rates,
and the certainty of knowing about it rather than waiting every 3 years for a settlement.
Absolutely.
But,
and with a population of 10 million, you've got to have the certainty on bridges, on roads, on rail infrastructure, on housing. We need that.
But Matthew Offord, I'm curious to know, someone coming from local government as well, won't there be, and how do you resolve the tension there might be in terms of what was devolved between the Mayor and the boroughs? The boroughs are the heavy lifters, aren't they? They're the spenders. They're the ones that know where their economic needs are and know where the housing is needed.
That is correct as well. But the relationship between the Mayor is very good. He works very closely with the London boroughs. I know they've identified priorities between themselves. So I think he will address their concerns in his decisions about infrastructure particularly. But David makes a good point, and that is the fiscal autonomy of London government is nothing like it is in other parts of the world, such as New York, for example, or even some of the municipalities in France, for example. So it's about time that we gave the Mayor and we gave the London Assembly those power to decide their own funding decisions.
And the boroughs as well. Well, OK, let's stick with the theme of what London needs to help its economy and turn to the question of river crossings. No shortage in central and west London, of course, but out east it's another story. Plans for a big crossing, the Thames Gateway Bridge, were shelved by Boris Johnson when he was elected. But could we now be seeing the signs of one big mayoral U-turn? Here's some background from Jerry Thomas.
Jeanette Withy uses the Blackwall Tunnel twice a day to commute from her home in rural Kent into Canary Wharf. Getting across the river has become an obsession.
I could do an hour from my office door to here quite easily. 3 times a week you could take an hour from my office door to here. That's not far.
More than just a waste of time, she says the traffic has lost her money and has had a huge impact on the way she can work.
You cannot guarantee a breakfast meeting. Absolutely no way. and many a time I've had to make excuses for not turning up. So people know now not to book me first thing at 9 o'clock on a morning, because the chances of me getting there are fairly slim.
The idea that East London needs more river crossings is uncontroversial. But exactly what type of crossing and where is? If Ken Livingstone had had his way, later this year, this would have opened to the public, the Thames Gateway Bridge. Attacked by green groups and local Conservative councils, plans for the 6-lane road bridge was eventually scrapped by Boris Johnson. But could a U-turn be on the cards? This week, Transport for London announced the results of their consultation into new river crossings in East London. Proposals for a new road crossing on exactly the same spot, reaching from Galleons Reach to Beckton, received the support of 71% of respondents. The Mayor's other option of a ferry was less popular. The message from some local businesses is clear.
Do a U-turn on it. We need it. It's not going to help East London at all if we don't have more river crossings. Not just one. I'd love to. I don't want a ferry particularly. I don't think that's going to be... It's not sustainable long term. Whereas a bridge and a tunnel, that would solve all the problems.
Businesses may be urging him on, but if the Mayor does want to go ahead with a bridge at Galleons Reach, he may face fierce opposition from some, not least those in his own party.
Well, joining me is Gareth Bacon, who's a London Assembly member and a councillor on Bexley Council itself. And I suppose we should point out, or start by saying, there was a kind of division in opinion, depending on which side of the river you were, wasn't there? Newham and Tower Hamlets and other councils were quite supportive of the idea of a Thames Gateway Bridge. People in Bexley Council and yourself weren't. Do you think that could or would change if a bridge proposal came back?
No, is the short answer to that, Tim. I think the boroughs who are on the north side of the Thames would maintain their support for it. Bexley most certainly wouldn't, simply because the road infrastructure in Bexley and the topography of Bexley wouldn't support the volume of traffic that the bridge would transfer onto those roads.
Would a revised or a slightly different model or a bridge that was more local rather than a great big one which was, proposed initially, would that meet with approval?
Well, I don't think that it could be possible to design such a bridge without destroying the business case for it in the first place, because the roads are simply too small. I mean, one of the principal roads that traffic would have to travel along is little more than a country track, where two cars at the moment have difficulty passing side by side, and that goes through ancient woodland, and nobody has even addressed that problem or come close to saying how you would fix it.
No, but don't your constituents, or wouldn't they, prefer, or when they weigh these things up, want the access of getting across to the economic heartland of the capital, north of the river, such as the person we saw in that film, and wouldn't they be prepared to take some of that disruption?
I suspect some might, but most wouldn't, because the area that we're talking about is predominantly residential, and the housing is very, very close to the road that would actually be concerned. What you would be effectively doing is turning semi-busy domestic roads into something like the South Circular almost overnight. And whilst there could be, potentially, although the planning inspector when the TGB was looked at didn't feel there would be any regeneration benefit, or the benefit would be marginal, there most certainly would be massive traffic and environmental implications, and I don't think that the residents would wear that.
So should the Mayor rule this out now?
Yes. I think, to be very clear, we're not opposed to the idea of more crossings in East London. I think everybody would agree that those are desirable. It needs to be the right crossing in the right location, and this is neither. And
if that's the case, it should be no argument. It should be ruled out by the Mayor. He's got the power to do that. He should be doing that.
Yes, I mean, what I'd like to see from the Mayor, and what I've called on from the Mayor previously, is to rule out a fixed link crossing in that location. Not to rule out crossings in East London. I think that there are other locations that could and perhaps should be looked at in more depth. But a fixed link crossing at that location should, to my mind, be ruled out, and that's what I'll be calling for.
And if he's not doing that, and there's a plan, of course, now to go ahead with a consultation on that, what do you say?
Well, I think it's a mistake to do that. I think that Transport for London have been very clever in getting this back onto the table, because it was, to all intents and purposes, dead and buried 5 years ago. Having it back on the table now, they've skillfully manoeuvred themselves into the position where
the Mayor of London's allowed that.
No, Transport for London have done it. The Mayor of London is allowing a consultation, and the consultation will take the form that it takes.
He could stop the consultation, the further consultation now. As you say, he could put a stop to it and go, it just won't happen.
Yes, he could do that, but he's committed to exploring the regenerative possibility of further crossings in East London. And as I say, broadly speaking, I think that that's fine. The danger is, and this is why we've been pushing hard against this, is that this particular crossing is still the wrong crossing in the wrong location, and it could get through.
David Lammy, were you mayor now, a Labour mayor, would you reinstate, would you go for a Thames Gateway Bridge?
There've got to be crossings. That's clear. 9 million people in London. We have to have easier routes to people in the southeast, particularly. I think it should have remained in the consultation. 71% of people were saying they wanted it. Clearly, the concerns of Bexley have to be met, and so I don't know the detail, but you've got to get away.
But the Thames Gateway Bridge, something of that scale, which I think was it 3 lanes in both ways? Was it 2? Would you go for Thames Gateway?
These proposals aren't the Thames Gateway. I mean, there's a dispute.
So would you go for? Would you repeat a Thames Gateway, the Thames Gateway Bridge first? Let's establish that.
I think that it should remain in the proposals that were there originally. Boris should never have taken the proposals
So that
out.
should have remained.
Yes, it should have remained.
Should be back there with them.
Yeah,
right.
we should be consulting on that and moving forward, but not just on that, because I think it would probably lead to increased press if it was solely on that. There are issues in terms of the Medway towns down to Gravesend, and you do need ferryboat crossings as well.
George Osborne, we've heard in autumn statements and budgets and whatever, no one's disputing, or everyone seems to think there's a need for infrastructure, and indeed he gave some money for the mayor to again look at river crossings. You're not affected in it, by it locally, but surely, as a Conservative, you would support proposals for something that facilitates traffic getting around the capital much more easily.
Well, I certainly would, but I go back to the point we were making in our previous conversation, that it's down to the local authorities to make that decision where they should be sited. Now, obviously, Bexley has had a concern about that and feel that's not the right location. But it has been acknowledged that 71% of people do want an additional river crossing.
Shouldn't the mayor be able to decide that?
The mayor should actually consult with the London boroughs, who are closer to the people than he is.
And does one then get a veto? Because obviously we've heard that the majority of the boroughs want it.
Well, the final decision is for the mayor to make. But I believe he should work closely with colleagues, both in local government on the north and south side of the river.
On that point, and the mayor's got to really think about the interests of London, not just of one particular borough. I think that is really important.
And
that's what his job is.
If you're honest, are you worried by the signals? I've heard you in the London Assembly indicating you're worried. I mean, you tell us here, are you worried? Do you think it looks like a U-turn's on the cards here?
I hope not.
Well, absolutely, but do you fear it?
Well, of course I fear it. I don't want a fixed link at that location.
Do you think it's likely, I should have asked?
Well, I don't know. I can't read the mind of the mayor. But what I would want to say, I mean, we've heard in your story and the other panellists today talking about 71% of people want this to happen. Let's examine that a little bit. I mean, Transport for London ran this consultation for 14 weeks and they had 6,000 people respond. That's less than 2% of the people consulted.
Yeah.
That's not an overwhelming
No, absolutely. I think we should make that. That's a very,
either.
very good point. And obviously, when they come back to doing a statutory consultation, I think we'll have to be much more rigorous and there'll be far more respondents. That's all the time we have on this at the moment. But thanks very much for coming in. Now, it's estimated that 4% of council homes in London are being illegally sublet, more than any other part of the country. But later this summer, this will become a criminal offence. The number of local authorities in the capital appear set to get tough, as Andrew Cryan has been finding out in Harrow, in north-west London.
According to the government, 4% of social housing in London is being illicitly sublet by the tenants without permission. That's one property in every 25. In Harrow, the council take it very seriously.
We've got a very small housing stock, we've got a very high housing demand, and all this is costing the council a lot of money to deal with.
We followed council officers as they went door to door, looking to inspect properties they thought were breaking the rules. But at the first one, there's a problem.
Morning, Harrow Council.
No answer. And at the second.
Hello, Harrow Council.
And the third. Now, this is the fourth property we've tried this morning, and nobody's answered. Unfortunately, the council at this stage have got no right to force entry at all. If they want to do that, they have to send a letter, they have to apply to the court, get a court order, and then come back. By the fifth, we're getting used to the sound of knocking. But then, an answer.
We're having a problem with getting into this property. And
But without permission, they're not allowed to enter and gather evidence at this stage. A message is left to get in touch with the council. Before it gets to this stage, an awful lot of work will have gone into these cases. They will have had to build evidence, quite often based on tip-offs. Very often, they'll have knocked on the doors before. They might have to knock on property number 6s again. But from later this summer, subletting your social property will be a criminal offence, punishable by up to 2 years in prison.
With it now becoming a criminal offence, it may well be easier for authorities now to engage maybe with the local police force to maybe get warrants and to execute warrants to force access to the properties, and then we'll be able to expedite cases far quicker and far cheaper than just continuing to knock doors and not get any results at all.
Hello, Council.
The new laws might have been a help at doors number 7, 8 and 9.
People are becoming more smarter, they're operating more sophisticated because they can see that there's a lot of publicity around tenancy fraud. They're covering their tracks a lot more by not answering the door or having people in the property that can pose as the tenant by leaving their passports and identification with the subletter and briefing the subletter what to say if the council does turn up, and we have had that.
Councils across London are looking forward to having more power on this issue.
Andrew Cryan reporting there. What do you think? Memo to Harrow: go round in the evening when there are people in who aren't at work. Anyway, Eileen Short is here from the Defend Council Housing campaign. What do you think about what is going to happen here?
I think it's a ridiculous and shameful waste of time and energy. It does nothing to create the homes that we actually need. Councils have the powers to deal with illegal subletting, but at the moment that really isn't the issue. This is part of a really sustained attack on council housing coming from the government. At the same time as Lord Floyd, the Benefits Minister, is going around Britain telling people to take in a lodger.
They have the powers, but obviously they don't have as tough powers, and these are tough powers. The threat of it being a criminal action.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. What you'll find, and I predict it now, that what councils will find is that people have got their sisters, children and their boyfriends living with them because they haven't got anywhere else to go. This is what's happening in London.
But in many other instances it won't be that. It will be a legal sublet, and anything that prevents, when we know it's a scarce resource, anything that stops that has got to be a good thing. Anyone finding ways of jumping a queue by subletting, it's wrong, isn't it?
Councils have already got the powers, and I tell you what's really created the nervousness for councils is that they no longer manage their housing properly with a housing office, with an estate officer who knows. Everybody's behind a switchboard, nobody knows what's going on, and so instead of managing effectively, they want to take the truncheon of the law.
Well, this will give them more chance to get into properties, though.
Yeah,
they might
there's
take
nothing
that.
to create any homes. There'll be people living in those homes, I predict it now, who are on the waiting list or should be, and where will they go? They'll go into a private rented sector that nobody can afford.
Matthew Offord, was this something that was really worth pursuing?
It certainly was. The pressure on social housing and council housing, certainly in my constituency, and I'm sure in David's as well, is immense. We have many people who are desperately needed to be homed, and if there is one person who is illegally subletting and making money out of these people, then we've got to take action. But I do ask Eileen, if the councils have already got this power, why are they not taking action? Yeah. The government have stepped in, and this is the right thing for us to do to bring in fairness.
I think you have to ask the councils, and I think most people know that if we're going to do something about the shortage of housing, then you need to build the council housing that we need and not cut the budget for new homes by 60%.
David Lammy, you've got to support this, and you get tough. You need all this property.
You can't have a situation where people are making money by subletting council property. So I do think it's got to be cracked down. But it's a small problem. Eileen's right. The big problem is supply. And you can't, on the one hand, be saying bedroom tax, taking a lodger, and then going down on people for doing the very same thing. So they've got to match this up. And frankly, this is a sense of being preoccupied with a small problem when the big problem, building houses, creating supply, is not being dealt with.
It may strike people as odd, mightn't it? We know, times are hard for councils. They haven't got much money, but they're now expected to put money into teams going around knocking during the day without much luck, incidentally.
Well, let me come back to the so-called bedroom tax, which is not a tax at all. This is something that the previous government decided to do in the private sector, and that was supported. But suddenly now, because it's in the social sector, the Labour Party no longer support that. And it's just, no one seems to understand why that is.
The point is, you've said, taken a lodger, now you're going after people that are doing that very same thing. That's the point.
OK, look, let's move on. Eileen Short, thanks very much indeed. Now it's time for a look at the rest of the political news in 60 seconds.
A £1 billion deal to build a university campus near the Olympic Park in Stratford has fallen through. Newham Council and University College London had been in talks since October to develop the site at the Carpenter's estate, but they haven't been able to agree terms. The Mayor reopened a new business centre in Tottenham at a site that was part destroyed during the 2011 riots. £70 million was put forward for regeneration in riot-hit areas, but so far only £4.5 million has actually been spent. Council tenants in Westminster are set to receive free broadband connections. The network will initially be offered to 1,000 homes in the Grosvenor estate from June, before being rolled out to all 22,000 council tenants by early next year. Under current reform plans, the fire service will take longer to reach many Londoners in the case of an incident. The figures from the London Fire Brigade reveal the impact of the plans, which will see 12 fire stations closed and 18 engines lost.
Matthew Offord, under these fire proposals, more fire engines will not be getting to this incident within this crucial 6 minutes. All right, it's not going to affect your area. You seem to have benefited by putting fire engines back, but are you worried about that?
Well, it's something that I've considered within my own area and the amount of fire stations and tenders that we've got. And what my concern was that I had to ensure that those tenders can actually reach road traffic accidents, for example, in that amount of time, if there had been a reduction. Now, I'm very pleased that the government have, rather the IFPA have listened to me on that issue, and we don't have any cuts. But what we have seen is a major change within the fire service across London, that there are less fires being attended. There is more preventative work, and we're now reaping the benefits of that.
And you, because there's a lot of emotion about this, but David Lammy, let's hear it from you. You can't complain about this one, can you really? I mean, you're not losing... are you losing any fire stations in your patch? I don't think you are. Your fire response times are not changing at all under these changes.
We campaigned,
in a big urban area.
We campaigned and we won, but there are 40 wards in London, some of them with very poor and deprived communities. There's a fire in your house, you pick up the phone, you ring the fire brigade, and now they're not going to get to you at the same speed.
But the modelling's been done. There are fewer fires generally across London.
Look, I'm sorry, when your house is burning down, you don't care about the modelling. You want to know that that fire engine's coming to you, and because of these
managing risk, isn't it?
Because of these cuts, the same lines we got on police station closures, we will now see people less safe in London as a consequence.
Don't you wish, and don't you think actually Labour should have taken on and should have looked at this a little bit earlier, really? It's outdated, how fire provision is in London.
I just don't accept that. We're now going to see more overcrowding in areas than we've seen before as a result of these changes.
I'm sorry, no more
That's
time.
not safe.
Both of you. Thanks very much indeed. Andrew, back to you.
In a moment, we'll look ahead to the big stories that will dominate